So I'd just like to focus around the EBW Team Assessment. So what I've focused on so far is how business emotional intelligence is used to, and the assessment is used to develop individuals, or how to recruit individuals. But what we found was that more and more there was a requirement to understand how teams operate successfully in organizations. And I was supervising a master's project back in 2004. And for those of you based in the UK, you've probably heard of the organization. It was a car phone warehouse, and we had an opportunity to collect lots of data from car phone warehouse and look at how their teams were operating. And what came out of that research and the literature review that was done at the time was this model of team effectiveness. So you have the team dynamics at the bottom. So how does people's emotional intelligence impact on the way they work together? And then importantly, there were 6 conditions that we found time and time, or 6 drivers, should I say, that came out that were really important to show when a team was successful or not. So these were things like vision, trust, identity, commitment, communication, which includes things like psychological safety, and how well this team actually worked together. So in other words, where was their focus? And what the team assessment is able to do is provide a benchmark on these drivers of team performance or team effectiveness, so the team can see very clearly where they are in relationship to other teams. So vision, as you probably can see just from the definition there, is about the level of understanding around the vision, and also about the agreement there is in the team about that direction of travel. And this is a linear assessment. So in other words, the higher you score, the more effective the team will be. Trust is about, as you'd expect, feelings of confidence, or how much do people trust each other in the team? Do they feel like people have got their back? Identity is really about accountability. It's about loyalty to the team. And this was really important because in a lot of organizations today, we've moved away from hierarchical structures and we have much more flat organizations. So people are often members of multiple teams. So the identity is about what makes them loyal to this particular team that they're being assessed on, and why do they feel accountable to this team? So for example, you might have an operations director who is a member of the senior management team, but also responsible for the operations division. So where's his accountability? Or where does he feel most loyal to? Is it to the senior management team that he's part of, or is it to the division that he's responsible for? So when the CEO suggests that they need to make a 10% headcount reduction, is he thinking, oh, this is great for the organization and that's what I need to do, and and he embraces that? Or does he actually, is he more loyal to his operations division and fight, tooth and nail to keep his the amount of people in his division up? So identity is a really important one for people to explore, because it affects things like where their values are, where the rules are for that team. Then commitment really comes from sports psychology, actually. It's a bit like grit. I don't know if you've heard of that expression, grit, but it's a bit like, it's about the team's drive and belief that they have that they can actually deliver on the vision. And why this is so important is that when you look at successful teams in sports, what you find is that they will play right to the whistle, regardless of whether they're winning or losing, because they still believe that they can do something to change the game around. And that idea runs through the commitment piece. So it's about people's drive and belief and the team's ability to deliver on the team's goals. So have they got the right people with the right skill set to actually deliver on the vision or mission if you're from America? Communication, as I said, is really about understanding how people share or talk to each other. But importantly, it's about that psychological safety piece. It's about, are people able to provide powerful feedback to each other that actually enhances or improves the team performance. And then finally, there's working together, which is about where's the focus on the team? How do they work together? What can they do to improve how they perform as a team? And what you get is the average score, plus you get a range of scores from how the individuals see each of those drivers. So it gives you a really insightful way of understanding what drives the team and how you can improve its performance. The great thing about this is that the assessment is taken from an intra and interpersonal perspective, so you can very clearly see how people see themselves and how they see others in the team by comparing the different scores that you can see in the report. And with the team assessment is a whole toolkit, so you can run a whole team coaching program or a team effectiveness program that can run over one day or up to sort of 10 months to a year. I did one with Thomas Pink a few years ago, and it was a year-long program. So each of these areas that I've just talked about becomes a coaching or a workshop for the team on its own. So in the UN, for example, at the moment, they're using this to improve the team's effectiveness, and every month they get together and they go through one of these drivers to keep the team's focus on it. And the other thing that they do, which I really like, is that they get the team, then the executive team that this is being run with, to then communicate that out to their own sub-teams. What have they learned? What are they trying to do differently? So it becomes, and all that is incorporated in the toolkit that you get with the team assessment certification. And within the bit I should have explained about is actually the EQ map. So you remember at the bottom of the triangle, where I talked about the team emotional intelligence. One of the things we're able to do by looking at the emotional intelligence part of the assessment is build these fantastic EQ maps, which shows the degree of psychological effort that you need between team members to improve performance. So here you can see between Steve and Sally, there's quite a lot of effort going on, whereas between Liz and Steve, there's no effort required because of the way they drive their emotional behavior. And do you remember I said for the individual, we get them to self-assess themselves before they see their EBW report? We do exactly the same thing with the team assessment. We have these EQ maps in the report, but we also have blank versions of this, and we give the teams yellow pens, green pens, blue pens, red pens, and what they have to do is they have to assess where they think they have to make the most psychological effort to work together successfully as a team. And obviously you then have the benchmark of the team assessment to have a conversation about why there's differences or if there's similarities and what they need to do differently to improve the performance on those 6 drivers that I've already talked about. And then at the end of the team program, what you're able to do is then get the team to benchmark themselves again or assess themselves again. And hopefully if they've done the work, there will be some improvement on these areas. And obviously if there isn't an improvement, then you've got a really good question, because it's their assessment. They've answered the questions. Well, why don't they feel differently? Why hasn't this team improved? So we can show change in performance. We can show the difference that the team has made, or the team has traveled, why they've been involved in focusing on these drivers of successful team performance. And you can sit there and go, yeah, but Stephen, that's just the EBW assessment. How does that, you talked about financial performance at the beginning. Okay, let's address that point. So when you're using the team assessment, or indeed if you're using it for an individual, we tend to break it down like this. So you have the individual, that's looking at what we call the intrapersonal benchmark. So how do they feel, think, and behave? And what performance indicators can we use to see how they're changing? Yeah. So that could be peer or customer or client feedback on the individual's performance. And there might be 360, there might be appraisals that we can bring in, as well as other performance criteria that might be related, that is related to how they behave in the workplace. And then as a team, we can do the same thing again. We can use the team assessment, which is a really good starting point, but we can also use other key performance indicators to measure the improvement of the team as well. So project times, team calls, team's reputation, lots of different performance indicators that are explored in the team toolkit to get you to think about that. But then because we take it from a systemic viewpoint, we're also interested in the stakeholders' perspective. So actually what we're looking at is, how do the customers or stakeholders, how do they feel, think and behave? And if the team is making all this effort to behave differently and change the way they perform as a team, what will they see differently in their stakeholders? So what financial benchmarks are there? What people benchmarks are, how their customers or stakeholders perhaps behave differently? How are they going to record that? How will they get that data from? Now, we're not a great believer in going up and making new performance indicators, but within organizations, you will find that there are often performance indicators already there that you just haven't thought about investigating. So like customer engagement surveys or stakeholder surveys, systems benchmark, financial benchmark. So improve, the amount of widgets that are sold, or the amount of new customers taken on, or retention. Yeah. So there's lots of benchmarks that we bring into play when we're looking at changing the business emotional intelligence, or getting someone to put lots of effort into changing their emotional behavior, and making sure that if they're going to put that amount of effort in on an individual or a team level, that actually it's making a significant difference to the performance of them, the team, and the organization. And that's one of the key USPs for business emotional intelligence. It's getting people to focus on those critical emotional behaviors that make a difference to performance. And I just want to bring up this case study. This was actually carried out by a partner. She's actually on the call today, Faye. Back in, I think it was 2020, Faye, you have to correct me, where you took a sales leadership team through the EBW Team Effectiveness Program. And if I remember correctly, there was 14 leaders that you were working with. Is that right? Or 16 leaders across
14 in 11 countries.
11 countries. Right in the middle of COVID. And what was fantastic about this team is, Faye can probably talk about this much better than I can. I wasn't expecting on the call today. But what was fantastic about this team effectiveness program was not only they had a new leader in this team, and the team were very worried about the new leader. So there was a lot of trust issues there. More importantly, this was a leadership team that had to work together because they had to share resources. That was the only way they were going to actually make a difference to their bottom line and the way they work together. And as Faye just pointed out, they were actually stretched across 9 different countries. So when she ran this program, I remember talking to her about it at the time, she said she had to make sure that they had generators, mobile phones, to make sure, because it was all done online during COVID, that everything was kept running so she could do these feedback sessions and run the workshop sessions. But what was fantastic about what Faye did was the actual difference it made to this team and the financial difference to the organization. So you can see there, when we look at the financial performance indicators that the team collected, they exceeded their 220 targets by up to 3 million. They did miss a couple of targets in Q4, but that was due to COVID, as we've pointed out there. But importantly, they also managed to reduce the overheads by over 700,000, which is fantastic given what was going on. And they were I think it was the second best team in the whole of the organization, weren't they? I think they were only beaten by a German team who was actually directly responsible for a COVID toolkit that was being pushed out at that time. So there was a direct need for what they were doing. But sorry, Faye, go on.
I just was going to say that last week, and I will share this with you in more detail, I had a letter from a different organization I'm working with. And they have their company divided into 3 major regions: APAC, the Americans, and EMEA.
Right.
And the experiment is that only the EMEA leadership is receiving the one-on-one coaching and group coaching live. And last week they sent me a letter saying EMEA has outperformed the APAC and the Americas region. And so for 2023, they're looking to now replicate the program for those other regions. So I'll talk to you about that later because I want
thanks, Faye. There you go, guys. Hot off the press, stuff that I didn't even know. Yeah. So what I was just going to point out, though, before we finish up today, is that what Faye was able to do was get the team to collect data from like the organizational health survey, where they had because of what they were doing, they had a record response rate. So engagement went up 5 points, innovation went up 3 points, inclusion, the diversity piece and the ethics piece, 4 and 3 points, and the average score were all above 75%, which if any of you who knows anything about engagement knows what a magnificent score that is. And then there's the other bit that was really important to show how they've made a difference was what I call system changes, or in this case, what we've written up as dashboard development. So what they did is that they actually, as part of the effectiveness program, they focused on comprehensive digital transformation of the marketing function to drive a 3-year initiative. And they focused on how they were going to measure that and what would the KPIs would be. Things like, for effective decision-making, etc. And they matched all that down. And what they were able to show very clearly, and as I said right at the beginning, against other teams, was how the system part of it showed that they had outperformed these other teams. So you can see there exactly what was done. Things like the remote sales force was deployed, the market segmentation, the Salesforce allocation enabled the leadership team to measure the CNS businesses across the KSA. So it really shows how you can use the output of the assessment and the toolkit and make it practical and purposeful for the businesses, so they can show where they're putting the effort in, what a difference it makes. Any questions at this point?